Brilliance Audio presents Dorchester Terrace, a Charlotte and Thomas Pitt novel by Anne Perry, performed by Michael Page. It was mid-February and growing dark outside. Pitt stood up from his desk and walked over to turn the gas up on the wall lamps one by one. He was becoming used to this office, even if he was not yet comfortable in it. In his mind, it still belonged to Victor Narroway. When he turned back to his desk, he half expected to see the pencil drawings of bare trees that Narroway used to keep on the walls, instead of the watercolours of skies and seascapes that Charlotte had given him. His books were not so different from Narroway's. There was less poetry, fewer classics perhaps, but similar titles on history, politics and law. Narroway had, of course, taken with him the large, silver-framed picture of his mother. Today, Pitt had finally put in its place his favourite photograph of his family. In it, Charlotte is smiling. Beside her stands 13-year-old Jemima, looking very grown up, and 10-year-old Daniel, still with the soft face of a child. After the fiasco in Ireland at the end of last year, 1895, Narroway had not been reinstated as head of a special branch, though he had been exonerated of all charges, of course. Instead, Pitt's temporary status as head had been made official. Even though it had happened several months earlier, he still found it hard to get used to. And he knew very well that the men who had once been his superiors, then his equals, and now his juniors, also found the new situation trying at best. Rank, in and of itself, meant little. His title commanded obedience, but not loyalty. So far they had obeyed him without question. But he had had several months of very predictable events to deal with. There had been only the usual rumblings of discontent among the various immigrant populations, particularly here in London, but no crises. None of the difficult situations that endangered lives and tested his judgment. If such a crisis were to occur, it was then, he suspected, that he might find his men's trust in him strained and tenuous. Pitt stopped by the window, staring out at the pattern of the opposite rooftops and the elegant wall of the nearby building, just able to discern their familiar outlines in the fading light. The bright gleam of street lamps was increasing in all directions. He pictured Narroway's grave face as it had been when they last spoke, tired and deeply lined, the effect of his difficult escape from total disgrace and from the emotional toll of his experience in Ireland. Pitt knew that Narroway had accepted, at last, the existence of his feelings for Charlotte, but as always, Victor's coal-black eyes had given little away as they talked. "You will make mistakes," he had said to Pitt in the quietness of this room, with its view of sky and rooftops. "You will hesitate to act when you know it could hurt people or destroy a life. Do not hesitate too long. You will misjudge people. You've always thought better of your social superiors than you should have. For God's sake, Pitt, rely on your instincts. Sometimes the results of your decisions will be serious. Live with it. The measure of your worth is what you learn from the errors you make. You cannot opt out. That would be the worst mistake of all." His face had been grim, shadowed by memories. "It is not only the decision you make that counts, but that you make it at the right moment. Anything that threatens the peace and safety of Britain can come under your jurisdiction." Narroway had not added, "God help you," though he might as well have. Then a dry humour had softened his eyes for a moment. Pitt had seen a flicker of compassion there for the burden that lay ahead, and also a hint of envy, regret for the excitement lost, the pounding of the blood and the fire of the mind that Narroway was being forced to give up. Of course, Pitt had seen him since then, but only briefly. There had been social events here and there, conversations that were polite but devoid of meaning beyond the courtesies. The questions as to how each of them was learning to bend, to adapt and alter his stride to a new role remained unspoken.